What's up, guys? So welcome to the second devlog video for my game Command Center Earth. Technically, I think this is devlog 1 because the last one was 0, so take that for what it is. But today I'm going to be talking to you guys about 5 game-changing assets that I use in almost all of my games, including Command Center Earth. So instead of just doing, the standard list of assets in video form, instead I'm going to give you the list of assets, but I'm also going to show you how they're used in the context of my game Command Center Earth, because I thought that would be helpful, and that's kind of one thing that I see missing a lot of the times. I love when people show off great tools, but I want to see, like, how is this used in your game? So yeah, that's what this video is going to be all about. Instead of rambling on for 20 minutes like I did in the last video, I'm going to just jump right in. All right, guys, so jumping right in here, the first asset on my list, because it's just an incredible tool, is Odin Inspector. It is amazing. It's a 2-part asset, really, which is a custom inspector, or it allows you to build custom inspectors, and it is a serializer. So it allows you to really easily serialize things like dictionaries and more advanced things than that. That's just one use case that if you've ever tried to serialize a dictionary in Unity, you know that it's a lot more wonky than it should be. So Odin just takes care of that for you. That serializer now actually is open source, so I don't even think you need to buy Odin Inspector to utilize that. But let's jump right in. I've talked enough. Let me show you how I use it in the context of Command Center Earth. So in my game Command Center Earth, each one of my levels is a scriptable object that contains some data about the level. So you can see here, Betty is a level in my game, and we can see this inspector here. I'm going to show you just a few things that you can do using Odin Inspector. So one is that you can expose executing a method in the inspector. So for example, each one of my levels contains a reference ID that kind of ties it to some save data. You can see that if I click invoke here, it will give me that reference ID, okay? And the way that I did this is using the Odin Inspector's button attribute, which is, I love this attribute. I'm gonna open up my level data and show you how that's done. So essentially, I just add the button attribute to any method, and then it will expose it in the inspector to whoever wants to use it, right? So I can essentially say button here, I define how I want it styled, so I always want it expanded, and I want it to be kind of a compact box styling. And then I can click that invoke button, and it will literally execute this method and give me back the reference ID associated with that level. So that is super powerful. It's a small little thing, but it's really incredibly useful. So like I said, I can just click invoke and it would give me that. I can do this for any one of my levels. So if I go and click just another level, I can click invoke. Pretty awesome. So one other thing that's really nice too is it allows you to define sort of a nice user experience or user interface for just, random small little fields. So for example, you'll see this is purchase required flag in my game. Essentially, this just tells people, is this level purchase required, right? Should it show as locked? If I click this yes, then it will ask, hey, is that level actually purchased, right? And you'll see that if I turn this on or off, it hides or shows this field. So how do I do this using Odin Inspector? I go in here and then I say, essentially, this is purchased boolean should only be shown if is purchase required is true. It's just adding this little attribute, which is really nice. So small little things like that to just make your user experience way more friendly to people maybe that are not programmers that are interacting with your scriptable objects or game objects. Really, really awesome. The last thing I'll show you before I end sort of this highlight of my first asset that I love absolutely is I like to make a nice little config window that holds my game-wide settings in all of my games. So you'll see I have a CCE, that stands for Command Center Earth menu item. If I click on config, this whole window I created using Odin Inspector, which was super easy. I have 3 tabs here: general, save and load references, and tooling, and it just holds my game-wide settings associated with each one of those. So for example, general, I have a save file name, right? So this is just the name of my save file. I can change it here, and it kind of makes sense, right? Because it's game wide, it doesn't really belong for me anywhere else other than maybe like this config window, but I define a lot more things than just that, right? And it's just a nice little way to define these game wide things that's really easily accessible to anybody and easily editable. So you can see tooling, what's the root snapshot save path? Oh, this is it, right? In my game, actually, I'll show you actually real quick how I utilize this. So I would do, it's kind of a scriptable object actually. Not a scriptable object, it is a singleton. I know, shame on me, but actually in this case, it does work pretty well. Game start state, you'll see if I were to find general config, you'll see, for example, I just say general config dot instance, and then what is my, add mob unit ID. So in here, you can see I have my add mob unit ID right. So actually my add mob unit ID is a combination of these two things depending on if I'm on Android or iOS. But hopefully you kind of get the sense of how I use it Odin Inspector, incredible tool. I probably rambled on way too long about this thing, but really, 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 you guys should be using it. The Inspector and the Serializer are both incredible. It's probably my favorite tool out of all of these, which is probably why I'm mentioning it first. All right, guys, so moving on to asset number 2, that's Node Canvas from Paradox Notion. Essentially what this asset does is normally it's used for creating, custom AI behavior using behavior trees and finite state machines. I actually use it for creating or controlling game state, I should say, in my games, which I really, really love. I know that's kind of an unconventional thing. I don't think most people do this. So I'm actually going to show you how I do that in just a second. But once again, Node Canvas, incredible tool. The developer's awesome. A lot of great support. It allows you to create custom behavior trees and finite state machines. Like I said, normally for creating AI behavior. But in my game, like I said, I use it for controlling game state. I'm going to show you actually how I do that in a second. Let's pull it up actually like this. So you can see I have this giant finite state machine here that I use for controlling game state. You'll see first off, I have a game start state, then I move to the overview state, a bunch of these random states. You can see I also have my level states because my game doesn't really have any hard stop point between my scenes. I have it all kind of loading asynchronously. So that's how I'm able to control all my state without having to do a lot of like these loads that are not asynchronous. So yeah, so the way that we would create one of these states in Node Canvas, or, for example, in my game Command Center Earth, is I'm going to pull up the script here for one of the states. For example, this is my game start state. Essentially, you just inherit from the finite state machine state or FSM state. You give it a category, and then once you do that, Node Canvas will say, okay, you can add it to your essentially board. So I'm gonna right click here, and then I'll click Save Earth. That was the working title for Command Center Earth before it was Command Center Earth. And then I'll find that game start state, and boom. Now, this little node will execute all the code that I defined inside the script. So with Node Canvas, we're given 3 callbacks. One is an on-enter, an on-exit, and an on-update. You can see that I define a bunch of behavior in the on-enter. For example, in my game, I define a bunch of my services. I create all of those services that I'll be utilizing later on, such as my game save and load service, my game music service, my mobile ads initialization. All of my initialization logic goes in my game start state. And that's like a really awesome way to just control my game state. And I'll show you actually by playing my game and letting you watch as I move through these states. So you can see also in Node Canvas, we define the starting point by just right clicking and then saying enter state, right? But it's already the enter state. That's why it's grayed out. I'm going to press play here, and we'll kind of see how my game moves through these states and why it's so powerful. So like I said, I'm just scratching the surface of Node Canvas because most of the time it's used for AI behavior, but I find it works really well for controlling game state. So you can see I moved from game start to overview. If I were to click, I would move into the Earth focus state. If I were to click my select meteor, I'm going to meteor focus setup state. Now I'm in my meteor focus state. If I were to click start mission, I'm going to start moving into my level states. So I'm in loading level, now I'm in level start, and now you'll see I'm in my level running state, and my game is actually running. This is kind of a preview of my training mission that I'm creating. Once I blow up, you'll see I'm in level end state, and then I can sort of restart the training, which will restart it all again. Hopefully you can kind of see how this is working. So if I were to even go into my level running state, you can see like what is actually happening. You'll see on update, I am actually sort of just adding to my elapsed level time, right? I'm just adding to that elapsed level timer, which is going up and up and up. But hopefully that gives you just a general idea of how I'm using Node Canvas in my game. One thing I will show off real quick is Node Canvas has this idea of a blackboard that essentially allows you to sort of add any game-wide variables, scriptable objects, or game objects to your board so that you can kind of pass those around nicely too. It also allows you to sort of pass in game objects and scriptable objects into a state. If I were to expand this, you can kind of see, I'll show you. If I just click game start state, you can see I'm passing in, for example, a scriptable object into my game start state, either via just dragging and dropping it in or using my blackboard. So if you're familiar with tools like Bolt, and there's one more finite state machine tool that I can't think of off the top of my head, it's kind of similar to that, although Node Canvas I think is targeted more at, let's say, more developers, more maybe of an advanced developer, somebody that's been programming for a little bit longer, things like that. It's more on the, I would say, advanced level more than the beginner level, which I think all tools are great, beginner or advanced. It just depends on what you like. So I know I rambled on a lot about Node Canvas, but I absolutely love it. You guys should check it out. That's how it's used in the context of Command Center Earth. All right, guys, so moving on to asset number 3, that's going to be Canvas Flow, which is now UI Graph. Canvas Flow, I believe, is the now defunct version of the asset. Essentially, what these two assets do is they're a nice little framework for managing and creating menus in Unity, which I think Unity is kind of lacking. I would be using the new version of Canvas Flow, which is now UI Graph, but I don't because it requires Unity 2019 and I'm on the old 2018 version. I'm kind of an old man these days. I prefer building out my game versus fixing a bunch of bugs whenever I update Unity. But I will be upgrading pretty soon here. So just to keep in mind, I'm going to be showing off Canvas Flow, which is the older version of UI Graph, but I heavily recommend UI Graph. I've actually utilized it, and I think it's a great update to what is the version I'm using now. So let me show how I use this in Unity, or in my game Command Center Earth, I should say. I'm going to go to one of the menus. I'll just do my main menu. So where is my main menu? Here it is. So in Canvas Flow, you could see that every menu is a scene. So in the new UI Graph, actually, that's changed. Now it's a prefab, which I think was a great call just because Unity's new prefab workflow kind of lets you isolate those prefabs and modify them and whatnot. At this time, Unity, when Canvas Flow was created, didn't have that, and so I think scenes were the right way to go. So Canvas Flow actually uses sort of this model view controller flow, if you guys are familiar with it. Whenever you create a new menu in Canvas Flow, it essentially creates a game object at the top, a canvas, a content game object, and then a background image. Essentially, that's what the 4 things that are created. And then it also creates a controller script for that specific menu. So for example, here, this is my main menu. It creates a controller script. It adds it to the top level game object. And then also every menu has its own camera. So this system works really, really well. It's a nice little isolation on each menu. So let me show you kind of how this looks. So you can see this is my main menu. And you can see I've just added, for example, some text. If I jump into the screen here, you can see I've added sort of a blinking carrot image. I've added sort of my start mission text. So yeah, so this is essentially a menu. We define each one of these menus as a scene, and it has that script associated with it. And then Canvas Flow kind of does, or it utilizes a stack structure. So I'm actually going to play the game and show you how this all kind of works out. So I'm going to open up my game. I'm going to press main menu, and I'm going to just start it. And then you'll see that every time I load a menu, you're going to see that it's going to pop up as a scene on the side here. So for example, my splash canvas controller, right? This is my splash screen, and then it goes away. My main menu, now my main menu's loaded on top of things, and then that goes away. So I'm not really utilizing the stack just yet, but when I click on my settings, I'll show you how that's managed. I'm going to go, and then the settings menu will be loaded. If I click on credits, you'll see that now I have my settings open and then my credits open as well. So this is now using the stack. So essentially my credits are the top of my stack and then my settings are below it. And if I dismiss, you'll see my credits go away. My settings are still there. If I click exit here, that goes away. And then my main menu. So this it ties in really nicely, or kind of goes hand in hand with my node canvas FSM that controls my game state. Essentially, I use my game state to present these canvas controllers or menus appropriately. So when I'm in my Earth focus state, I present my missile select canvas controller. So Canvas Flow handles managing your menus really, really nicely. I absolutely love it. Like I said, I think the newest version is even better than this one. It's just when I upgrade to 2020, which will probably be pretty soon, I'll upgrade. But you guys should definitely check out UI Graph. I absolutely love Canvas Flow. And actually, there's a whole nother facet to Canvas Flow, which allows you to create your menus using sort of a node editor, sort of like the node canvas asset that I showed you before. I don't utilize that. I actually just utilize the script version. Actually, real quick, I'm going to show you how the script looks for my main menu, just because you guys are probably curious of that as well. So you'll see for my main menu, it has these nice little callbacks, which are, for example, canvas did appear, canvas will appear. There's also canvas will disappear and canvas did disappear, which allows you to do some nice initialization logic for your menu. So if I were to say, canvas did appear in my main menu, what do I want to do? I want to control, let's say, show the mail button, or rather invoke the mail button on click when this thing is shown, right? Whenever we override this canvas did appear, it's essentially saying, do this thing when this menu is shown, which is super nice. The way that you present a canvas controller or a menu using Canvas Flow is essentially just saying present canvas controller. You call this method and it will just present it. So I've talked enough about this asset. You guys can definitely dive in, but this is wholeheartedly an asset I recommend. That new version is called UI Graph, and I believe the developer is Pelican 7. He is super responsive, or I'd say he's just super into this asset. I really think that he's invested a lot of time in making it great, and really, like, I've been using it for, I want to say 2 years now. Even though it's deprecated, it works amazing. So I would definitely check out that new version of UI Graph. All right, guys, so moving on to asset number 4, that's going to be DoTween. I believe it's from Demigiant, I think is the developer's name. Essentially, it's just a tweening engine, and I use it in, like I said, all of my games. It's incredible. It has a great API. It also has a nice little inspector that allows you to create small little animations that essentially are just really quick and easy, give you nice visual feedback without having to go back and forth in your code and having to compile it. It has both of those facets, which is awesome. The API allows you to create more complex stuff. The inspector allows you to create small little animations that give you instant feedback. So let me show you how it's used in the context of Command Center Earth. I'm going to go ahead and open up my main menu once again, and I'm going to expand it. And I have this small little animation that is just the carrot blinking. So if we essentially go to this blinking carrot image, you'll see that I have this little carrot here. And essentially in my game, when this menu is presented, it blinks on and off. So the way that I created this was using that DoTween animation component. The cool thing about that is I can define quick little animations. Let me actually click that once again. I can define quick little animations in the inspector and get instant feedback, which, as I said, I think that's a way better tool than doing things programmatic. If you do need the complexity and the control, I definitely would recommend using the API. Otherwise, this inspector is great. So I can click play, and you guys can see that it just, boom, it just starts blinking, and I could see instantly how that would look, which I think is really awesome. I could, for example, change the color using this inspector and then press play, and then I could see, oh, okay, actually this is going to be transparent. Let me make this non-transparent and press play. You can see, okay, cool, like that looks reasonable. Let's say I want to make it a little faster. I just make the duration shorter. So that is amazing, right? Like, I think animations are far more powerful when you can use Unity's inspector, because you get this instant feedback. You can see if it works and modify that. That's one reason I love DoTween. This custom inspector is just really, really awesome. Small little animations like this, it really shines. And you could do things like color, you can move it, you could rotate, you could even change text. It's just really awesome. So that is the first half of why I love DoTween. This custom inspector makes things really easy to sort of create animations for. The other reason is it has a really robust sort of API that I absolutely love using. So I'm going to show you a more advanced version using that, the more programmatic way of manipulating sort of animations and creating tweens using DoTween. I'm going to open up my controls canvas controller. So in my controls canvas controller, I have essentially these squares that blink on and off, okay? And so actually I'm going to open up my game and show you guys that way, because I think it'll break otherwise. I'm going to press play here. Once it opens up, I'll jump into that control screen and I'll kind of show you what's going on and then how I've created it using DoTween's sort of robust API, which I really love. Actually, like I said, both the inspector and the API are great. Not to mention the documentation is awesome with DoTween, and I think that's kind of common amongst all these assets for me. So you could see blinks on and off, turn left, blinks on and off, turn right, and then it blinks both, you know, these, and then the boost as well. So how do I do that? I'm going to open up my menu, my controls menu, and then I will open up this controls display group, and you can see this is where I am using DoTween to create a sequence. So I say DoTween sequence, and then essentially I use its sort of API to create a sequence of tweens that will allow me to blink on and off those things. So append means append this tween to the sequence. There's nothing before it, so it will be the first thing. A join means I don't want it to append to the last thing that happened. I just want it to happen at a specific point. So I'm saying append my left canvas group blinking on, so the outline blink on and off. And then I say at the same time as that, I want that text that says turn left to blink on and off. And essentially, if that's the only thing that I want, if it's only like the left thrust outline and text that I want to blink, only do that. Then I could say set the loops for that sequence to -1, which means make it happen infinitely. And then I could set some sort of a delay before that actually occurs. So I could say, you know, wait a second before that animation starts and then simply play it, right? You could see I also have my right. If I turn on my right thrust blink, I can just do the same thing. I just append it to the end of my left. So when that one's done, do this one. If I want the boost, I would append the boost. So after my left and my right go, append both of them blinking on and off. So hopefully this gives you just a small little deep dive into how you utilize the API and also how you utilize that inspector. So I think the inspector, you have to buy the pro version, but is heavily worth it. Actually, all of this API stuff here is free. DTween is free, which is amazing. The pro is where you get the inspector. Well worth it. Incredible asset. Use it in everything. Highly recommend it. Great work. DTween developer, I think it's Demi Giant. Or Demi Giant, I should say. All right, guys, so last but certainly not least, Editor Console Pro from Flying Worm. Essentially, it's just a better console, which honestly, Unity is severely lacking. I'm not going to lie. So if we actually press play real quick, I'm just going to dive right into this one just because I think the improvements that this console brings are immediately apparent. So we have our standard console here. You can see if I click here, the call stack that Unity gives me. Granted, I know this is probably improved in 2020. Not much though. The last time I checked it out, you could see this is the call stack, and it's just, I mean, I feel like I can't make sense of what is going on here. So if I click on Console Pro, Editor Console Pro, you can see if I click on the exact same thing, I'm going to go ahead and click warnings. If I click on the exact same thing, check this out. Oh my God, the call stack is so much more readable. If I click on the line, boom, it pops me right into where that warning is occurring. What more do you want, right? I feel like this is amazing. How do you see what's going on, see what's wrong with your game without actually being able to understand your warnings, your messages, your errors, and being able to quickly go to where that exception is occurring and fixing your code, right? So even though this is not a super, fancy tool, it knows what it does well, and it does it well, right? So I really appreciate that. I love when tools are very focused on what they're trying to solve and do that exceptionally well. Editor Console Pro is that exactly. I really love this thing, and I pull it into my projects almost immediately just because every time I start a small project or a game, the other day, for example, I was working on trying to learn some of Unity's machine learning stuff, and I didn't have Editor Console Pro in there. I was trying to look at the console, and I was just like, what is going on here? Like, I couldn't make sense of it, and I was frustrated that I didn't just pull that asset in sooner. So I would really heavily recommend you guys check this out. Actually, there's a lot more features here than just what we're looking at right here, which I'll jump into real quick. But one thing that I especially love is that you can just toggle on and off, which I know is very similar to the Unity's console. But you could also create custom filters for your logs. So I'll just kind of show that off real quick. I can go in and I can go to my preferences, and I could say custom filters. I can add one and just title this, let's say untitled. I can create whatever color I want, and then I can essentially filter by, let's say, a class. I could filter by word. There's all kinds of crazy filters. I could say what kind of log type do I want that to be, like only exceptions, for example. There's all kinds of crazy stuff I could do here, right? So I'm just gonna say, leave it as that, and then I could actually toggle on and off those filters appropriately. So I didn't actually show off any of the filters, and I don't use any of the filters in Command & Center Earth, but there's another game that I'm working on that I use these filters heavily. So for example, we have a lot of animation code and networking code in my other game, and I don't like all of those logs to be cluttered up inside of my regular logs, but they're really useful when I'm trying to debug networking or animation stuff. So I define something like networking here and animation as another filter, and then all of my scripts associated with those things, they just can be easily toggled on or off and colored appropriately, which is really, really awesome. So Editor Console Pro, highly recommend you check it out. There's also, I believe, a console that you can have a network console too that you can add. So really, like I said, this is just a tool that knows what it does well and does that thing. I've looked at a few of the other consoles, which I would say are also great, but this is the one that I use on everything that I would highly recommend. 100% worth the money. Once you guys start utilizing a log like this or a console like this, it's hard to go back. I especially also, one last thing that I especially love their, right clicking to copy the stack entry. There's a few more other things you could add, more columns as well. You could say, what is the class that's calling this thing, right? Which is pretty awesome. So, what is the class? Nothing. This is the system info helper. All kinds of crazy things, right? So I'm probably not doing this thing justice, but really, like I said, it's an amazing console. Like, what more do you want, right? So hats off to Flying Worm. I highly recommend Editor Console Pro. I keep, it's a tongue twister, I feel like, but great work. That's my number 5. It's an amazing one, and I use it all the time. All right, guys, so that was the end of my top 5 assets that I use in almost all my games and how they're used in Command Center Earth. Before I go, though, I want to give you guys some honorable mentions that didn't quite make my top 5 list, but are great assets and great tools that you should check out nonetheless. So I'm going to just jump right in here. The first one is Rainbow Assets. Absolutely love it. I'm an organization freak. Essentially, what it allows me to do is add custom colors, custom icons to folders to make them stand out and more easily searchable and findable and all that good stuff. So you can kind of see it working right here. You can see that my game assets and my studio name I've made blue, and I've added a custom icon to them. All the other sort of assets folders I've made purple just so that I can just easily sort of visually avoid them. And also one thing that I especially love about Rainbow folders is that it automatically adds certain icons to specially named folders. So textures, it will just automatically add, for example, like this texture icon. So this one right here, shaders, this one, so on and so forth. So great little asset. You guys should definitely check it out. Moving on from there, Monkey Commander. Monkey Commander allows you to execute either custom commands or ones that it already predefined for you. One of those is just finding assets is a command that allows you to do. Another one is maybe opening scenes quicker. I'm going to show you that one real quick now. I'm going to just press the sort of tilde key. That's how I open it. And then I'm going to say OS, which is a shortcut that it defined, which means open scene. I'm going to search for the scene I want to open. Let's say my level HUD canvas controller. Remember, my menus are scenes. And then I'm going to press OK. And then there you have it. It's opened up that little scene, right? So a few shortcut keys allowed me to open it up. So that was Monkey Commander. Great little tool. You guys should definitely check it out. Highly recommend, especially for those custom commands that you can define. Those I also use heavily in Command Center Earth. Maybe I can show you one real quick. If I go to my commands and then I go to zero out transform, this is a command that I define that essentially allows me to look through all the game objects in a scene, find their Z axis, and then set that to 0, right? Because I need to do that often in Command Center Earth. So great little tool. Moving on from there, I will move on to SR Debugger. So SR Debugger is a great little console that is especially useful when you are building to mobile and you want to expose some methods or commands to mobile that you can just execute quickly, right? It's sort of like God mode on mobile, and it allows you to view the console on mobile. It also allows you to view sort of certain information without me talking so much. Why don't I just show you guys? It's kind of crazy. So I'm going to go ahead and go to main menu. I'm going to press play, and then I'm just going to click on the hidden little button that SR Debugger exposes, and it'll show me that console. So I'm doing it in the editor, but this would be exposed on Android or iOS. I'm going to click 3 times. You'll see it gives me some system information. I know it's kind of small here, but on mobile it's much bigger. It shows me the console. You can see I can click. It'll give me the stack trace. It allows me, like I said, I can define those custom the commands using the SR Debugger's API. So I could, for example, execute my save game function, right, by clicking on this button. And then lastly, it has a nice little profiler. Great little tool. Highly recommend it. And then there's 2 more I have for honorable mentions. One more is Asset Usage Finder. So Asset Usage Finder is a nice little asset that just allows you to find assets that are used across your project more easily. So I'll jump into prefabs, for example. I'll click on level bounds. I'm going to right click and say find usages in a project. That's what Asset Usage Finder exposes in our menu. It's going to go ahead and search my project and then pops up a nice little window here. From there, I can go and say open scene and search. And then you'll see that it says, hey, within this scene, it's used, your level bounds are used here. If I click it, it highlights it. I mean, what more do you want, right? It allows you to just find assets super easily, which is amazing. I love that feature. So definitely check that out. Asset Usage Finder is a great asset. Last but not least, Universal Device Preview from, I believe it's Almost Engine. So essentially what this does is it allows you to view your scenes or your menus in various resolutions very, very quickly, which is really nice if you're trying to create something responsive. So let me show you how that works right now. I'm going to go to menus. I'm going to go to, let's see, one that's a little more fancy. Maybe we'll do controls. So controls, and then I'm going to open up Universal Device Preview. I'm going to say Device Gallery. And where are you? There it is. So check this out. It's really cool. I love this little asset. So essentially, I'm going to say update previews. Boom, 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 boom. It's going to refresh all of these, and it's going to show me how my menu looks on all of these resolutions, which is incredible, and all of these devices, which you can define very easily using Universal Device Previews settings. So the iPad Pro, so on and so forth, which is really nice for debugging. So that was my last honorable mention. Those are all really great tools as well. I heavily recommend you guys check those out. And yeah, that's the end of my list. All right, guys, so that was my top 5 assets that I use in Command Center Earth and, you know, almost all my games, along with some honorable mentions. I highly recommend you guys check out all these tools. They're great tools. Essentially, they allow us as developers or artists or people just working on games in general to do more with less, right? That's why I love tools. That's why I wanted to create this video, because I know that if I can share this information with you, you have more of your time back and you can make your games better and allow me to play more awesome games. So it's kind of this vicious, awesome loop. So definitely show those guys some love and check out those tools. Also, if you guys liked the video, if you hated the video, if you have some feedback for me, whatever it is, leave it in the comments. I had a few comments on my last video. I loved reading them. And also, I feel like it's just great insight and it allows me to know if you guys like what I'm doing, if these videos are worth something. And last but not least, if you guys, also liked it, I would love for you guys to go check out my game, Command Center Earth. You can find it in the Android and iOS store right now. It is free. There's some levels that you have to watch an ad to unlock or purchase the game. I think it's for $2 right now. But yeah, you guys can jump into the game immediately. It's free. Play some levels. And if you guys like it, buy it. If you don't, no worries. You checked it out. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to creating another video for you guys.